Great. And it looks like we're close to 40 participants, but we had many registrants. So I do want to maybe wait another, should we give them 1 or 2 minutes for folks to join? All right. So it's 3 minutes past the hour and we can go ahead and get started. I know that other folks will join, but as a matter of housekeeping, I'll let you know that this session is being recorded and the recording will be available afterwards, as well as the PowerPoint presentation. Most of this information is in the PowerPoint presentation that we shared last week with our providers. So you shouldn't be seeing any particularly new information here tonight. We just really wanted to open a forum to chat with the small fleet participants who might be interested in using the innovative small e-fleet set aside within HVIP. So by way of introductions, my name is Nikki O'Cook. I work with CALSTART. We are the administrator for the HVIP program on behalf of CARB, and I'll let my colleague Andrea introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrea Morgan, and I'm the lead staff at CARB for HVIP, which is our largest zero-emission clean truck and bus voucher incentive program. And the Innovative Small E-Fleets pilot is a part of that larger HVIP program, and we're very excited about it.
Yeah, and I think that that is a great level set, Andrea. There may be some folks here tonight who have not participated in HVIP in the past. HVIP is a long-standing incentive program funded by the California Air Resources Board to transition from dirtier diesel trucks to cleaner trucks, zero-emission trucks. In the past, it also funded hybrids and natural gas trucks, but at this time, it no longer does. If you'd like to learn more about this program, you can always go to californiahvip.org. We can learn how to participate there in the standard HVIP, which is actually still open now and has funds available for both trucks and buses of all class and sizes for commercial use in California. So I encourage you, if you've not participated in HVIP before and you don't necessarily understand how that voucher incentive program works, visit the website where you can learn more about how to participate there. This set aside that we're talking about this evening is a very specific program of $25 million that's been allocated for specifically small fleets and innovative financing models. So we'll get into that now. Mama? Mama? All right, so the Innovative Small E-Fleet Set-Aside, again, as I mentioned, is $25 million within the greater HVIP program. This particular set-aside is intended to help the smaller fleets in California overcome the barriers that they see in transitioning to zero-emission trucks. Again, by small fleet within this context, we mean fleets that have 20 trucks or less, and less than $15 million in revenues. We're going to get a little bit further into exactly what those definitions mean. The greater HVIP program, as I mentioned, does fund things like buses and school bus and transit bus, but this program, again, is really specifically designed for trucks only, and those are class 3 through 8. Now, for those of you who are familiar with HVIP, HVIP has always been a first come, first serve voucher incentive program, which means that your applications are not evaluated in a competitive way to compete against one another. Rather, it's a streamlined voucher request process. And your primary point of contact as a small fleet in both HVIP and ISEF will always be your dealer. The dealer is the one who is trained on how to request vouchers on your behalf. And then the amount of the voucher, very much like a coupon, is applied to the price of the vehicle right up front at the point of sale. So this is not a rebate program. This is not the type of program where you pay for the vehicle and then wait for a rebate later. Your dealer is going to be your primary sort of representative in this process. The only slight difference is that in the ISEF program, we are allowing for something called a provider, which means if you're not going to be buying directly from your dealer, if you choose instead to do something like a short-term rental or a lease, or to try out a program that is currently being called Truck as a Service, then we are allowing that within this set aside for small fleets only. Traditional HVIP does not allow for short-term lease or rentals and Truck as a Service. So this would be the place to try those types of innovative models. Right now, our provider applications are open and available online at the California HVIP website. That means that those applications are for providers. So all of the types of folks that I just mentioned, your short-term rental companies, your leasing agents, your Truck as a Service companies, now is the time that you can go to our website and apply to be an approved provider in this program. We will be opening for actual voucher requests at the end of the month. So if you're a small fleet, don't worry, you have not missed your opportunity. Right now is the time that we're evaluating the offerings that providers are bringing to the table. And at the end of this month is when you'll be able to put in a request for a voucher on your behalf and actually start purchasing vehicles using the program. I'm going to pause here and see, one, if my colleague Andrea has anything to add, but also to see if there are any questions bubbling up yet. We are going to get further into the actual voucher process and definitions a little later in the presentation, but I know I've covered a lot of acronyms and a lot of information up front. So if folks have some immediate urgent questions, you can raise your hands or place them in the chat or Q&A.
Yeah, so Nikki, while we're waiting for folks to raise their hands, there have been a couple of questions that come into the Q&A. The first from Mark Leopold is, do they have to be diesel or can we participate with gas-fueled vehicles?
So this program is for zero emission trucks only. Now, if you're asking about which trucks you have to retire, this program does not require any type of scrappage. So you don't have to turn in an old truck in order to get a new truck using HVIP ever. But this program is only used for funding zero emission trucks, which can be either battery electric or hydrogen. And you can check out all the trucks that are in the program and the vehicle catalog, which is at californiahvip.org. And then you click on vehicle catalog.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Another question in the Q&A box is, a provider told me that more documentation is coming soon. Can you please clarify what additional documentation is being produced, if any, and when it will be provided and for whom, the provider or the customer?
There will be no further documentation from our end. The implementation manual and the attachment that outlines this program have all been published and they are available online. Now, what your provider could mean is that they are currently filling out their portion of the application. And when it's time for them to put in a voucher request for you, they will be asking for some documentation from you, namely a purchase order. And that would be later in the process. So that might have been when they met. But as far as the documentation from our end, it's all been published in the implementation manual and is available online now.
Great. All right, we have a few more questions in the Q&A box. One question from Christine Smith. What's the best way to know the class of our vehicle?
Well, the best way is usually on your DMV registration. It would tell you the gross vehicle weight of the vehicle that you're driving. You can also look up the year, make, and model online pretty easily to figure out if you're driving, say, a class 4 or a class 6 box truck. It's all depending on weight. And another good way to check is you can go directly to that HVIP catalog and select if you're driving a cargo van or a box truck and find something that is similar in size, and then you'll see what types of vehicles are available through the HVIP program in that same size and weight class.
Great, thank you. And we have another question of what defines zero emission?
So zero emission in this case we're referring to only the vehicles that are available in the HVIP catalog. We realize that there may be some other zero emission options out there, but the ones who have sought to be included in the HVIP catalog are all available and listed online. And they include both battery electric and fuel cell. And they include both original sort of OEM built vehicles, as well as some upfitted or retrofitted conversions. And all of that, again, is available at californiahvip.org in the vehicle catalog.
Great. Then we have a question. Is it anticipated that the Tesla Semi will become an available option?
It is anticipated. I can't give a date, but I do anticipate that it will be an option in the catalog at some point.
And then we have a couple of questions asking if can this be retroactive? And someone saying that they have HVIP vouchers for Class 8 trucks, and they want to know if they need to buy the truck before they can get approval from ISEF. Would we be able to fund them retroactively through ISEF?
No. So the intention of ISEF is really to help those fleets overcome the barriers who cannot use traditional HVIP. However, if you have a truck that you're purchasing in HVIP and you would really prefer to use the ISEF model for whatever reason, because of the increased incentive or the flexible financing, you're welcome to cancel your HVIP voucher and then apply for an ISEF voucher. But we do not allow for folks to sort of move vouchers from one program to the other, nor will we be going back and adding funding to current HVIP vouchers.
All right, we have another question. How many years is HVIP funding as a whole anticipated to last? Not specifically the set aside, I'm sure that it depends on the number of applicants. So I can take that question. HVIP is a pretty long-standing program. It's been in existence for over 12 years now and really helping support zero emission and other cleaner than diesel technologies. While it's not possible for us to say exactly how many years we expect to continue receiving funding, we do anticipate that there will be a substantial amount of funding coming in for HVIP next year. And we know that at least for certain categories like drayage trucks, we anticipate there to be continued funding for the next 2 to 3 years at least. But a lot of this is really based off of appropriations from the state legislature. So we do have to wait and see how the California state budget works out before we can really set funding amounts and estimate how many more years of funding we'll have or how many vehicles we'll be able to fund over the next several years.
Great, thanks. Shall I move forward with the presentation?
Before we do that, I do see that we have a raised hand. So Nikki, if you're able to unmute the one raised hand we have, let's see if we can do that.
Yes, Lisa McGee. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, yeah, I have a question about the leases that you mentioned. What are those terms as it relates to the fleet side?
So the only very strict in stone term of that lease is that it's 3 years, and that's the HVIP sort of standard. But that's just 3 years that you're responsible for reporting back on the actual voucher. In fact, within ISEF, we would allow you within those 3 years to potentially lease it on a shorter term basis to other small fleets. But the important part is for those 3 years, because you've received a voucher of this size for that vehicle, that fleet always needs to be one of the small fleets in our definitions. So actually, thank you, Lisa. That's a great cue up for our next slide, which is how do we define the eligible small fleets for this program? So within the 3 years that your company is has this vehicle out for lease, it needs to be placed with companies that have 20 or fewer trucks, are operating in California with less than $15 million in annual revenue. Again, this needs to be a privately owned trucking company. It could also be a small nonprofit, but we're not looking at public agencies or shuttle bus companies at this time. Independent owner operators also qualify. Whoever you decide to lease the vehicle to would need to just sign the same terms and conditions as the original sort of leasing fleet that you chose when you requested the voucher.
So then what is the, yeah, it kind of does, but what is, okay, so then it's 3 years or a month or a week? Is it that one person can rent it or lease it? I guess I'm not really clear on that.
Yes, so your company is responsible for reporting back on that vehicle to us for 3 years, but within that time you are able to lease it to multiple small fleets for the duration of your choosing.
Okay, so one fleet can be responsible and they can run it out to other people.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Again, just as long as the fleets meet this criteria and as long as, you're reporting back to us who the truck is actually with. If you read the IM closely, we also require that short-term rental and lease companies have those trucks out in the field and operating for a certain minimum number of days per year. I believe it's 200 or 275. I'd have to check the IM. But the point being that we didn't want to finance vehicles that would just be sitting on folks' lots. We wanted to make sure they were getting out there and getting used and in the hands of small fleets.
So I guess one question to add to this is, so can the provider be, I guess, the person that dictates the rentals or not?
Yes, a provider could be a company who's doing leasing and rentals. And it would be then the provider's first step would be to go online now and complete the provider application, which sort of gives your company background information, what types of vehicles you'd like to lease to small fleets, at what rates. And once we have that information, then you would go onto a list of providers available on our website. We will not post your pricing though, don't worry about that. What we're going to post is your name, your contact information, what types of vehicles and sort of what structure you're going to be offering. And we'll make sure to circulate that list once it's populated to all the attendees of this webinar as well.
Thank you.
I saw you come off mute, Andrea. Did you have something to add?
No, well, I just took a look at the IM and just to clarify your point, Nikki, about how many days out of the year we expect any company that's doing short-term rentals or similar short-term lease offerings, the expectation is a minimum of 200 days out of the year that those vehicles are with smaller fleets that meet this eligibility criteria on the screen.
Great, thank you. I see Victor Pacheco's hand up. I will unmute you now. Go ahead, Victor.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I spoke with a rental company about the electric trucks, but they said because the trucks are so expensive, the lease is going to be about, for instance, $6,000 a month, that they're going to charge, but they claim that because the electric trucks are so expensive. So how are you guys going to control that? Because if they're going to get funding for those trucks, but they are still going to charge us a lot of money to lease the trucks. So, I mean, who's going to be on control of those charges? Because if we lease a diesel, I mean, it's half of that price. Now, if we want to lease an electric, I mean, it's double the price, but they claim it because the trucks are so expensive. So that's my question, what is going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question, Victor. Thank you so much. So The rental company that you're working with, I would love for you to refer them to me. We would be very happy to help them figure out how to participate in this ISEF program. Within ISEF, we allow rental companies, whereas they have not been allowed in past HVIP. And within this program, we have actually increased the voucher amounts to nearly double. So that means that we believe that with this increased voucher and this increased flexibility for rentals, that rental company that you're talking to should be able to lower the monthly cost that they're offering you. Now, we also require that when they go in and they request a voucher on your behalf, they will be putting in your small fleet information, and they're going to be putting in a purchase order that has to reflect the voucher and the incentive that they've received. And then we check again at redemption that the documentation of how much they're renting that vehicle to you demonstrates that it has been discounted by the amount of the voucher. So we do have a couple of checks in place along the way to make sure that providers are passing along this value to small fleets. Now, if for any reason while you're participating in the program and you don't believe that the value has been passed on to you, we do encourage you to reach out to us. But I would really appreciate a connection to the rental company that you're working with. Perhaps they are not aware that there is this increased voucher available for them to provide zero emission truck rentals to small fleets like yours.
Okay, thank you.
And Nikki, while we're on this eligibility slide, we've had a couple of questions come into the Q&A box that fit very well in this. What is an eligible small fleet? And the first, does it matter if my company is a startup and has no financial history or revenue? And then in a similar vein, there's a question of, does 20 or fewer mean 1 to 20 trucks or 0 to 20 trucks? Do I currently have to own a truck or have an authority?
So you do not have to own any trucks yet. That is true. We are okay with folks who are just starting out. But as far as your authority, there are steps along the application process where you'll be needing to fill out things like your motor carrier permit number or your USDOT. So your standard business setup should be fairly progressed in order for you to be able to complete the application and voucher request.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so a couple of folks were asking, what exactly is a provider? We use sort of this broad term provider because we did really want to allow for different types of companies and models to come forward and demonstrate what solutions they thought they could offer to small fleets. So we covered that, this could be a rental. It also could be a lease, and it could be a short-term lease. It can also be a standard purchase and have sort of standard financing. Now, I know that very often financing a purchase actually turns out to be a lease, depending on how your financing company works. But all of these solutions are options. And the last option, which we're very interested in exploring, has sometimes been described as truck as a service. Sometimes it's described as transportation or energy as a service. So there's a few different ways that folks think about it. That's a fully how do you describe it? That's really a wraparound contract in which you're paying for a service agreement with a company who's providing a truck and fueling together. So all of these options are available. As I mentioned, the provider simply needs to go to our online application and really describe the offering themselves. And we understand that some of these offerings may differ from one another. Some offerings may include fueling, others may only include a charger. Some may include all of the service and maintenance and insurance, others may not. So we don't expect for each offering to look exactly the same. We do encourage fleets to kind of shop around and find out what is the best fit for them. Again, that's why we're not going to post pricing online, because each offering is going to be actually quite different. And we want you to just, find a provider who's maybe offering the truck that you're looking for, the type of arrangement that you might be looking for, and then contact them to get specific pricing. Now, I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions about what is a provider, how do they work, how do you find them?
Yeah, so there's one question asking, with providers making applications to participate in the program, what will the catalog listings look like given the program is encouraging financing, EVSE, etc.?
So the catalog, the HVIP catalog that has vehicles is not going to change per se. There will be a page for ISEF. There is a page for ISEF now, actually. If you go to the California HVIP website and click on purchasers, there's a drop-down menu that allows you to go to the ISEF program. There'll be more of a menu, right? There'll be a listing of all of the providers who have applied to us, along with what vehicles they're offering, what services they're offering, and contact information. So that's how all of the providers are going to be listed there. I do believe that a lot of the folks who have been following the progress of this ISEF program may already have a partner in mind. And that's fine. Just make sure that they're paying attention to our deadlines and encourage them to fill out the provider application if they haven't already, because that is a step that does need to be complete, and they do need to be listed on that directory that I mentioned before they're going to be able to request a voucher on your behalf.
I think that was all of the questions specifically about providers. So we can move ahead to the next topic, Nikki.
All right. HVIP approved dealer. Now, any of you who have worked with HVIP before understand how this works, but I'll cover it quickly for those of you who do not. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, in order to request a voucher, it is your dealer who does it on your behalf. When you click on the catalog and begin shopping for vehicles online, you will see that each vehicle is associated with a set of approved dealers. These are dealers who have already learned how the voucher system works. They have a login into our system, and using that login, they will go in and request a voucher on your behalf. Now, each of the providers for the ISEF program will probably have listed the dealer that they're going to work with, and that dealer is actually going to receive a unique link in order to request vouchers through this ISEF program. But it's very much the same system that's normally used in HVIP. So nothing particularly new here, but I'll pause in case folks who don't normally use HVIP have questions about HVIP dealers. All right, I don't see any questions yet, so we'll keep going. All right, so here's a quick map of what we've talked about a little bit. For small fleets, your process really starts once our providers are listed online. You choose who you want to work with. And then once you've contacted your provider will work with your dealer to submit a voucher request. And it is your dealer who's going to complete the voucher redemption for you. So there's not a lot of paperwork that the small fleet needs to fulfill. However, they do need to be prepared to support their provider and their dealer with things like their ID numbers, their motor carrier permit numbers, a purchase order, etc. Again, this is a comparison just to remind folks of what the major differences are between our standard HVIP program. Many of you have been using it for many years, and this new set aside. So in the past, HVIP has not allowed for rentals and short-term leases. In ISEF, we will allow for all of those, including truck as a service. HVIP itself only covers vehicles. In ISEF, we are extending these voucher amounts in order to cover things like chargers, insurance, maintenance, or other costs that can be bundled into the overall cost to the fleet. Both are still open on a first come, first serve basis. However, ISEF is only open for trucking fleets, again, privately owned or small nonprofits with 20 trucks and fewer, and an annual revenue cap of 15 million. In both cases, it is the dealer who will be putting in the voucher request. However, in ISEF, we have a third-party provider who is also inserted into this deal. And lastly, the voucher cap in ISEF is 5 vehicles per fleet. Now, I see a couple of questions getting queued up here for voucher amounts, so I'll pause on this slide for a little while so folks can take a look at this. If you go to the HVIP catalog right now, you will notice that if you look at class 3 vehicles and class 4 and 5 vehicles, you will see that the voucher amounts listed here are about half of what we have in this table. So the question in our Q&A that's saying, you know, you've been told that under this program, you can get double the voucher amount. Yes, that is true. We have extended all of the vouchers for these classes of vehicles up to twice what is listed in the HVIP catalog. I'll pause here for questions. Gary, I see that you asked, if the voucher amount is not fixed, do we need to justify the proposed voucher amount? And if so, how? So yes, we allow for the provider to propose what voucher amount they would like up to these caps that we've listed here. We would hope that the request for higher voucher amounts would include more things like including charging, fueling, insurance, service, and or maintenance. So we'll be taking a look at sort of the voucher amount that is requested. We'll be taking a look at the data that we have on, say, comparable diesel operating expenses. But in reality, this is our first pilot. And so we believe that most of the provider applications will be approved because we really want to collect some data and take a look at how these funding and financing tools work for smaller fleets. I see Lindsay asking about the 5 vehicles per fleet cap. The 5 vehicles per fleet cap does not have a dollar amount cap. There is a cap, though, for providers. So we didn't want any one provider to come in and request all of the available funds. So for the first 6 months, we have a cap that says that no single provider can claim more than, I'm sorry, is it 20% of the overall voucher funds, Andrea?
I believe it's 15%, but I will double check.
I'm sorry that I don't have that answer right off the top of my head, but that cap will be in place for about 6 months. At the end of that 6-month period, we'll take a look at the contingency list and then begin funding vehicles that may go beyond those caps. But that's really more of a concern, again, for the providers than, say, the small fleets.
And it is, I just double checked, it is indeed 15% for providers. So small fleets, you can request up to 5 vouchers at the amount shown on the screen here, depending on vehicle class. One other question, Nikki, that relates to the program and what voucher funding is good for is, does this program include purchases, or is it just for rentals, leases, etc.?
Yes, this can be used for a standard purchase. Though I will say that the intention is that we hope that the providers are actually helping small fleets above and beyond a normal sort of sales transaction. So things like helping with charging, helping them understand their LCSF credits, helping them plan their routes and their charging. These are the types of tools we really hope that the sales team is putting together to create a wraparound service for their smaller fleets who need that additional support. Oh, and strong service and maintenance agreements are also highly encouraged. Thank you. How long is the voucher valid for? Andrea, how long are HVIP vouchers valid?
Yeah, so once an HVIP voucher has been approved, and the way the process works is that the voucher is approved after a purchase order has been put into place. So essentially, you've agreed to make this purchase, a voucher is approved, and then the voucher is valid for 18 months or until, and it's redeemed once the vehicle is delivered. So we understand we're living in some pretty uncertain times, and there are some supply chain issues that have caused manufacturers to have delays in deliveries. So you can request on a case-by-case basis to have a voucher extension granted if it doesn't seem as though a vehicle is going to be able to be delivered within that 18-month window. So that's something we've been relatively pretty flexible about, just understanding the current supply chain issues and uncertainty that's out there.
Yeah, and this might be a good time to point out an important fact that some of you may not know, which is that if your vehicles are going to be subject to the upcoming truck and bus rule deadline at the end of this year, there is the ability for you to request, is it called a waiver, an extension? I'm not sure, Andrea, which allows you to continue to operate the vehicle that you have until your zero emission vehicle is delivered. But you do need to have your purchase order in hand. So now would be the time for you to get your order in, even with the understanding that that order may not be delivered for 10 to 12 months. The truck that you currently have, you could continue to use until that time.
Yeah, so and that's called the manufacturer delay extension under the truck and bus regulation. And as Nikki noted, you do need to get a purchase order in order to be eligible for that exemption. And I believe that you need to have your purchase order in by September 1st. So really you have this month to get a purchase order in place if you're interested in purchasing a new vehicle and being eligible for that manufacturer delay extension.
Good point. I wasn't aware of that looming deadline, and you can always find all of these details as well just by Googling truck and bus rule CARB and going to their website. There's one additional thing that I would like to point out about how these voucher funding amounts are set, which is we do have modifiers for vehicles that are in disadvantaged communities. So I'm going to go to the next slide and I'm going to let Andrea explain what modifiers can in fact increase your voucher amount.
Thanks, Nikki. So we'll walk through really briefly a quick overview of some of the modifiers that are out there and how they can actually increase the voucher amount that you saw on the slide before. So there's a modifier available for if a vehicle is performing drayage operations. That will increase the voucher value by 25%. As well as if a vehicle is domiciled in a qualifying disadvantaged community, it's also eligible to receive an additional 15%. So in an example of a Class 8 truck that's performing drayage operations and domiciled in a qualifying disadvantaged community, you'd actually be eligible to receive up to $288,000 in a voucher for the purchase of that truck. And you can tell if your vehicle would be domiciled in a disadvantaged community by using the CCI Priority Populations tool at the link on the screen. And any vehicle that would be domiciled within a disadvantaged community, disadvantaged and low-income community within half a mile of a disadvantaged community, or potential low-income households within half a mile of a disadvantaged community would be eligible for that additional funding. There's also additional funding available for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. So if you're interested in purchasing a hydrogen fuel cell truck, that's also available to you. Note that, as Nikki mentioned earlier, dealers will really serve as a point of contact and help with filling out the applications. So all the dealers are aware of these different bonuses that you can receive. And they'll help do the math and figure out what the final voucher amount will be, and make sure that you're getting every dollar that you would be entitled to under the ISEF program.
Great, thank you. We do have a question here, which is the did you say it was 200-day usage requirement?
Yes, it's 200-day usage requirement.
Is that only for this set aside, or is that a general HVIP requirement? So the 200-day usage requirement is important here because HVIP actually does not allow for rentals or leases. So we have no reason to enforce within HVIP how often that truck is rented or leased. So it's really only within ISEF that we're going to be checking in with those rental and lease companies just to make sure that the truck has been placed with a fleet for a minimum of 200 days per year. Now, if the fleet that it's been placed with has parked the truck for some reason, that's not our concern. We're not actually checking usage as in, is it on the road? We're checking usage as in, is it with a small fleet? I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Nikki. And I see we have another question on what is the definition of performing drayage operations. So to be eligible for that drayage operations plus up, you have to demonstrate that your truck has sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. The purchaser will have to submit a copy of their permission to enter a port or rail yard, such as the Uniform Intermodal Interchange and Facilities Access Agreements, or UIIA authorization. So your truck doesn't have to be operating 100% at ports to qualify for this, but we will need to see a copy of a permission to enter a port or rail yard.
Great, thanks. And it doesn't have to be just the UIAA agreement, right? It could be other sort of ports. Some of them have other permissions, yeah?
Exactly, that was just an example.
Mm-hmm.
I also see a question on, does the voucher need to be paid back at any point? And no, the voucher would not need to be paid back so long as the end user fleet adheres to the different terms of operation.
I see here a question, if it's a truck as a service model, does the lessor need to meet the small fleet requirements or just the lessee? It's just the lessee. So we do know that the truck as a service or the rental fleets or the leasing fleets may be much larger companies and much larger fleets, and that is all right. We are just asking at the time of voucher request that you identify at least the first small fleet that you're going to rent or lease your truck to. That may change over the next 3 years. That may only go for 6 months, and then you lease it or rent it to another small fleet. And at that time, you can tell us who that is. But we just want to make sure that that truck is staying with small fleets. However, the actual truck as a service provider or rental company could be a much larger company. Are the providers of charging stations only available for the vouchers, or do they need to provide a vehicle also? Yes, so in this case, we are only covering chargers if they are bundled with a vehicle. However, if you are looking for funding for chargers only, there are other funding opportunities, including the Energize program and local utility incentives as well. I'm not sure that I understand this question, Andrea. Maybe you do. It asks, is there an overlap between HVIP and Sourcewell dealers? Are you familiar?
No, so I'm actually not familiar with Sourcewell dealers. So I'd be happy to follow up online or offline, and we'll get our email addresses sent out to all the participants or into the chat, so that whoever asked this question can follow up with a little bit more information, and hopefully we'll be able to help you out.
Great, thanks. I see two really interesting questions here, and so I'm happy to pause, and if these folks also wanted to raise their hands to unmute themselves, I welcome that as well. So the first question is, will the dealer provide special financing? I have not been in business for more than a year, and no banks will provide financing for a business unless they've been in business for more than 2 years. So this is such a good question, because this is one of the major barriers that we identified for small fleets and trying to reach electrification. We know that zero emission trucks are very expensive pieces of equipment, and we know that it is really difficult for small businesses to get financing and loan approvals. So we believe that by adding this additional incentive, right, by doubling the standard HVIP voucher, that we have now lowered the overall cost of the vehicle to such a point that a financing company should be willing to finance the remaining balance of that vehicle for your small business. However, we are still learning, right? This process is for us to see and observe and hope that that is how this actually works in the marketplace. If you find that you are reaching really tough sticking points and barriers that are really difficult for you to overcome, if even with the increased incentive amount, you find it very challenging to find dealers or leasing agents who are willing to finance these vehicles for you, we would like to open the door for discussion and problem solving together, because these are exactly the types of barriers we are trying to help overcome in the marketplace. Another question here is, I applied through a dealer and they are asking me questions about chargers. I have an OEM that's taking care of these chargers, and I'm not sure how to answer all of these questions. So this is a good question, just sort of pointing out sometimes that between dealers and OEMs and small fleets, many tasks in the process of electrification can get dropped or overlooked. So we're really happy to help you coordinate between your dealer and your OEM, between your dealer and your provider. You can feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our email address is ISEF, ISEF at californiahvip.org. Your dealer can also contact us directly with questions, but I certainly do not want the opportunity for your fleet to request a voucher through this program to somehow be missed because they were unsure about whose responsibility it was going to be to arrange chargers for you. So we do have folks standing by that can help with technical assistance. We also have a team of dealer trainers, and we liaise with OEMs all the time. So please feel free to reach out directly if we can help you in any way. Can you please specify how an HVIP approved dealer can become a provider? Yes, certainly. So an HVIP dealer can go onto the HVIP website right now. In the top right corner, there's a button that says purchasers. Click there. You'll be taken to a page that has a drop-down menu for the various set-asides within HVIP, and ISEF is listed there as one, Innovative Small E-Fleet. When you click there, you'll see a link to a provider application. So the dealer can go in there to the provider application, give your contact information, and then there'll be a next page where you can list the types of vehicles you would like to offer small fleets. There you'll be listing the vehicle, year, make, and model, the price that you would like to offer, the voucher that you need in order to offer that price, and some more details about what other supporting elements you'll be including in your offering. With that information, we'll list you as a provider on our directory, and you can begin requesting vouchers for small fleets. Shall I keep going through questions, Andrea, or move on with the slide presentation?
There are a couple more that I see that relate to the cost of the vehicle and voucher amount. So let's hit those. One is, can the voucher cover 100% of the cost of the EV, or is there a percent cap as in HVIP?
There is no percent cap. So in fact, the voucher may in fact cover the entire cost of the EV and the cost of a charger, or the cost of some sort of fueling agreement, or the cost of perhaps an increased insurance rate. So we do allow for, in this case, the voucher to cover even more than the cost of the vehicle. The one thing it cannot be applied to, however, because of state rules, is it cannot be applied to taxes. So if your offering would need to also then include things above and beyond just the vehicle. Like I mentioned, it could be the charger. It could be, say, a fueling card if they're not going to be installing chargers for you. For hydrogen, that's one important option, right? That along with the truck, they may give you access to a hydrogen fueling station, and that's included in your price. It could also include something like insurance or enhanced service and maintenance. So yes, the voucher can cover more than the vehicle.
All right, and then we have another question. A few months ago, when I scanned the list of dealers online, I didn't recognize most of them. They weren't mainstream names like Ford, Dodge, etc. And I'm just curious if these seemingly smaller dealers, not big name brands, are vetted for quality as compared to the big names. So I can talk a little bit about dealers in HVIP. So all of our dealers through HVIP and are folks that we have provided training to on how the HVIP program works. We're also happy if folks have any bad experiences with dealers, please reach out to us, and we're happy to look into that and make sure that we're rectifying the situation. But we do work really hard with our dealers to make sure that folks have access to good information, both about HVIP as well as about electric and zero emission trucks and buses through HVIP and the ISEF program.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to move to the next slide because it may answer some questions about the process. So as we mentioned, there is a provider application that's open now. This actually has nothing to do with a small fleet. So at this point, the small fleet does not even need to be identified. This is really just a way for the provider to let us know what they'd like to offer small fleets, and a way to sort of get on the menu, right? They're going to go into the directory. So this is the very first step. Again, it's open now. We're going to review those. And then at the end of this month, August 31st, the ISEF program will open for voucher requests. It is at that time that a small fleet can work with a dealer and a provider to put in their voucher request. And that's when you're going to want to have your purchase order in hand. So if you're considering a purchase now, as Andrea mentioned, probably best to go ahead and get your purchase order in with your dealer so that they can be ready on opening day to request voucher set aside for you. That will all be coordinated internally. There is usually a series of checks where we'll be coming back and asking for some additional information. There's a signing of terms and conditions. And then that funding is really, it's set aside and reserved for you, even though the vehicle is may not be delivered for 3, 6, 9, 12 months. but that funding is now yours. Once the vehicle has been built, it is delivered to the dealer. The dealer, again, now has a second step of documentation that they're going to be providing to us. That includes things like we mentioned, we would want to see copies of your rental or service agreements just to make sure that the value is being passed on to the customer. And then once that redemption process is complete, that would be when we pay the voucher directly to the dealer. So there's no point in this process where you would be paying upfront and then getting reimbursed for the voucher. And there's no point in this process where the checks are being cut directly to the fleet. The funding typically always goes to the dealer. Now, I did see a question a little bit earlier about what if the funding goes beyond and above the cost of the vehicle. And if that's so, we would just ask for the provider and the dealer to sort of let us know where the remainder of the funding is going to go. In this case, it may be going to the provider, right, who's then going to offer fueling solutions or insurance solutions. I see a couple of raised hands, and I also see a couple of questions. I see Gary has been waiting patiently to ask, do purchasers negotiate specific costs and terms with each dealer or provider? Yes. So each dealer and provider is actually going to have something slightly different to offer you. As I mentioned, some of them are doing rentals, some of them are doing truck as a service. Some of them may have more inclusive packages than others. And so it really would be up to you to shop around, check out what types of trucks and what type of agreements you want. And those terms really are between you and your provider. There are some terms and conditions on the HVIP program, and that's a standard form that would apply to all voucher requests. Charmin, I see you've been waiting with your hand up. Charmin, if you are ready, I will go ahead and unmute you. Charmin Watson, would you like to ask your question?
Note that you may be muted on your own end, so you may have to unmute as well if you're trying to speak.
Okay, I don't see her unmuting, so I'm going to go ahead and move back to Victor. Victor, I'm going to unmute you, and you also have to unmute yourself.
Okay, so my question is on the insurance, how that is going to be managed. The insurance on the vehicle, like the physical damage.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be different with every provider, to be honest. So, for example, we've talked to some truck as a service providers. They have already made their insurance arrangements, and the insurance is bundled into the cost of the vehicle. However, looking at maybe more traditional purchases, once you purchase the vehicle, then the insurance does become your responsibility. So that's something that wouldn't be included in the cost of the vehicle. So it really depends on which option you're choosing from the menu, right? Is it a rental? Is it a lease? As you know, some leases, some all-in leases include insurance. Other lease options allow you to seek out your own insurance. So it really depends on which options you're choosing, and we'll just be looking for that to be reflected in the monthly or per mile rates that you're charged.
Okay, so let's say I am purchasing the vehicle. So do I need to insure the vehicle if the value is $450,000? That's the value that I need to register with my insurance? Or that's the question, because if that's the case, the insurance is going to be very expensive to insure a $500,000 truck.
Yes, and we do see that as a barrier. So I am not an insurance professional, and I cannot advise you on how to legally insure your vehicle, but if you find that you are reaching, again, a major barrier to overcome in trying to find insurance for your vehicle, I would invite you to reach out to us directly, and perhaps we can help to connect you with others who have been able to solve this problem. But we do recognize that this is one of the larger challenges when it comes to these more expensive electric vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing that I'm probably going to ask is, so what is, I mean, let's say a truck get into an accident. So, and they total the vehicle. So what is what I need to do? I mean, let's say I get insurance for $200,000, but the vehicle, the price of the vehicle is $450,000. So that's what I'm trying to get an idea. Do I need to insure the truck for the real value of the truck? And if that's the case, that cost is really going to increase, insuring a truck that we own right now that it costs $100,000, against a truck that it costs $450,000, the price is going to be a big difference.
Yeah, this is an excellent question. I can't offer you an exact answer or give you sort of legal advice on how best to, register and insure your vehicles, but I would be happy to continue this conversation offline if you'd like to schedule a meeting with my team.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay.
It's very valuable information, Victor, so thank you.
Okay.
Sharman Watson, I see that you've now been able to unmute yourself. Would you like to ask your question? Sharman Watson?
I see Charmin just messaged that it's still unable to unmute, unfortunately. So happy to follow up with you later, Charmin. And I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. A couple other questions, one asking to clarify the basic steps. So they ask, so we find a dealer now from the list, get them to issue a purchase order. Then on August 31st, we have the dealer apply for us for the voucher. And eventually we'll be paid to the dealer and we then get the trucks.
Yes, basically those are the right steps. I would just add one additional step though, which has to do with completing the provider application. So I highly encourage folks to go into the catalog, shop for vehicles, contact dealers, get pricing. Those are all things that you can do now. Now, if that dealer has not decided to be a provider yet, they need to go in and fill out the next provider step. We will have a list of providers up about the middle of the month. So around the 15th, you'll see a list of providers listed, and we'll continue to add more as applications come in. But those providers are the ones that are going to be able to do the special increased ISEF voucher request for you.
All right, and then I see another question. If a fleet has passenger vehicles but not trucks, would it be eligible for the program? Is the applicant required to have at least one truck in the fleet?
The program is for purchasing trucks. So you don't have to have a truck in your fleet now, but the program is only eligible for trucks. So we're not doing any sort of like passenger moving vehicles. So even if you were to buy, say, one of the not step vans, but delivery vans and other shuttles that come with both like a cargo or a passenger option, we wouldn't allow vehicles that have the passenger seats. All of this funding is really set aside for goods movement, not people's movement. We're really looking at trucks. It may expand in the future, but at this time, that's the restriction. But if your question was if your fleet needed to have trucks in it now, no, it doesn't. If you're a fleet of passenger vehicles now looking to add a truck, that is also okay. Lisa, I see you have your hand up. I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Okay, hi, thanks. So I have several questions here. So the question that I want to start with, so you said this is going to be recorded, and then I want to know if it is, where and when, because I couldn't find the previous one. And then what time on August 31st is this opening up? And also, what is the maximum, or is there any maximum associated with the different eligible costs? And will you notify the fleet or the provider on the award, and how long will that take? What are the eligible chargers? And then last one is, how many projects can a provider submit?
So many questions. Okay, I'll see if I can cover them all. So on August 31st, we are going to open for voucher requests. We don't have a set time. I think typically it's mid-morning, but we will let you know. Your follow-on question to that was, I heard, sorry, say again?
Okay, so we'll start with the recording. Is this recorded, and then when and where, and then the previous one as well?
Yes, this is being recorded. It takes us a little while to get that recording downloaded and uploaded online. And the previous one is as well. And I have an email link that I can send to you, Lisa.
Okay,
Next
thanks.
question.
And then, yeah, the other one was, is there a limit on the number of projects a provider can have? And is there eligible types of chargers or limitations on chargers?
We do not currently have any limitations on the types of chargers, but we do have limits for providers. So for the first 6 months, any one provider can only claim up to 15% of the total funding available. I haven't worked out exactly what that number is. And then after 6 months, we'll sort of like drop that cap and start funding vehicles and voucher requests that are on the contingency list, ones that came in after they've reached their cap. But for the first 6 months, we are capping all of the providers at 15%.
So is there a cap on the number of projects a provider can have?
Only in the case of rental and truck as a service fleet. So rental and truck as a service fleets, I will say that we wanted to be careful that we weren't, funding the build out of large rental fleets. So we capped that at 10 vehicles. So if it's a rental or a truck as a service fleet, the cap is 10 vehicles, but otherwise, no, the cap is 1%. So especially for those OEMs and providers that are doing smaller voucher amounts, or the lower class sizes, class 3, 4, 5 vehicles, they'll probably be able to get more vehicles in under that cap than say the larger class 8 offerings.
Okay, and then and how long will it take for the fleets, or I guess the provider, be notified? And why did you guys make it such a short period for small fleets to, really get informed and then submit by the 31st? It's really a short and tight, and maybe even burdensome in its own way. I'm curious where you guys came up with a short window.
Yeah, so we hope that they will actually not be all of the funding to be requested on the first day, right? It is our great hope that there will actually be several weeks or months while providers are continuing to bring forward provider applications and small fleets are continuing to get in their voucher requests. We do not expect for all the funding to be gone on day one. So we hope the window is much longer than that. We did want to turn around though and open it up to small fleets. We've been developing the program for more than a year, and I know folks have been really waiting and hoping to get their voucher requests in. So, which is why we allowed a shorter period for us to quickly review what providers were available and then open it for voucher requests.
And that other one, how long will it take for the fleet to find out, or the provider to find out if they were awarded?
Sure. I'm not actually sure, Andrea. Usually within HVIP, I think the voucher requests are reviewed within just a few days and you receive a notification.
Yeah, so I would expect that there may be some back and forth. So overall, the speed at which something is approved will likely be on how much additional follow-up is needed. from us and CalSTART and reviewing the application, and then how quickly we receive responses on those. So it can be a few days to a couple of weeks, just depending on how that back and forth goes.
Okay, all right. And then the last one is, are there any caps on any of those other outside items in the projects for other items like chargers or fuel, or is there any cap, or is the vehicle the only thing that's capped as far as the $120,000 rebate?
So the cap is the total voucher cap. So the cap is 2x of HVIP, and anything that you can fit under that into that amount is allowable. So if the vehicle is a portion, the charger is a portion, service maintenance or insurance, if those are all portions of it, those are fine to include. But the overall voucher cap is 2x of an HVIP voucher.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
All right, Nikki, I think we should probably move on so that we can cover the rest of the material.
Great, thanks. Oops, sorry. So as I mentioned, the best place to take a look at what is available is going to be at californiahvip.org. There is a vehicle catalog there. Now, when you're looking at the vehicle catalog, remember that the voucher amount that is listed next to the vehicle that you're interested in is actually going to be doubled under the ISEF program. Also, if you're seeing a vehicle that you're interested in, I do recommend that you go ahead and reach out to the dealer now, because that dealer may not yet be interested in participating in ISEF. They may not have looked at this set aside yet, and they may not have small fleet customers that they're already investigating this for. So you should contact that dealer and let them know that you would like to purchase that vehicle using the ISEF program. And then we can take the next steps in training them, helping them do a provider application, et cetera. Now, this again is not relevant for small fleets. Small fleets do not need to fill out anything in this first step. I'm just putting this up here because I believe there are providers on this call who may need this as a refresher. So again, on the purchasers page at the HVIP website is where you can currently find the provider eligibility application. You're going to enter things like your contact information for your company, the types of vehicles that you'd like to provide. We do ask for a comparable combustion vehicle pricing just because we'd like to be comparing apples to apples. Now, we have a lot of this data internally, and you're actually welcome to use our own TCO calculator, which is available online, to find this number. We want to find out the total projected cost that you would like to charge a small fleet, whether or not it's a rental or a lease, a truck as a service. Just let us know if you're going to be charging small fleets on a per mile or per month basis. And then also we're probably going to ask, how much does the small fleet need to come up with upfront? What's their down payment or their first 2 months lease term payment, whatever arrangements it is that you're making. There's some additional questions like what type of chargers are available, what other supportive services are you offering to wrap around for a small fleet. And once we have all that information and we see that the provider application meets some of our minimum requirements, then you'd be approved and added to our directory of providers. Again, I'd just like to reiterate, we're not going to post your pricing online. We are only going to post your offering, the vehicles, and your contact information. For pricing, small fleets are going to have to get in touch directly with providers because the pricing does vary from provider to provider. Each offering is different. Every fleet is different. And so that's something that you have to discuss directly with dealers and providers. And again, we're going to be open at the end of the month for those voucher requests. So we've been through the voucher request process a couple of times this evening. I think I can just leave this slide up. And again, I'll just go back and check on questions really quickly to see if there's anything that I can answer about the overall process. Are providers who are only offering EVSE eligible to apply on behalf of a fleet? So no, you would not be eligible to apply for EVSE only. However, you could be part of a provider team, right? So if there was, say, a dealer OEM who was selling a vehicle and you wanted to provide the EVSE solution and together you created a small fleet solution, that type of teaming up does work and is encouraged, but you cannot request EVSE only. It needs to be with a vehicle. A follow-up to the startup business question: where can I see what documentation is required to apply for a voucher? Andrea, is there a place on our website where folks can find out what they need to have ready for an HVIP voucher request?
Yeah, so probably the best place to find that would be in the HVIP implementation manual. I believe the first appendix has a copy of what the application looks like, or it may actually be the second application. I'll double check and include that in a response to this question so that we can share that link.
Great, thank you. I see a couple of Lisa McGee's questions, but I hope that we've answered them. Michael is asking a clarification question. What amount is the 15% cap for providers based on? Is it the full 25 million or the amount actually available for vehicle funding? It's slightly less than 25 million that is actually available for the program. And I can find out the exact calculation, but it is based on that 25 million. It's just a little bit less than that. And then 15% of that is the cap. Please remind me when providers will be listed on the website. The providers who have turned in their applications already will be listed up by the 15th. However, we will continue to add to that directory as provider applications come in and as quickly as we can review them. We do say that it'll take us about 10 days to review each application. Some may be more straightforward than others, but that directory we hope will continue to grow over time. So what's listed there on the 15th is definitely not exhaustive. There may only be a few there on the 15th and more to come in the coming weeks. We have a question again from Charmaine Watson regarding drayage. She says that she was unable to get drayage credit even though she performs drayage. I'm going to try to unmute you again so you can clarify your question. Hang on and let's see if we can get this to work. I'm going to ask to unmute and then you also have to unmute yourself. I don't think that Charmin's able to unmute. Oh, there we go. You're unmuted, Charmin. Would you like to ask your question? If you're speaking, we cannot hear you. Uh-oh. Okay, maybe try to put your question into the Q&A. We have Lindsay Olson asking if the trucks are housed in an area that's not in one of the DAC categories, but serves DACs, can you still qualify for the modifiers? No, at this time, the DAC modifiers are only based on domicile address. Is that correct, Andrea?
Yes, that's correct. And I see we have a note from Charmin indicating that they have also called in on a phone. So Nikki, if you want to try unmuting the phone line that ends in 407, hopefully we'll be able to connect with Charmin.
All right, I'm going to click unmute for phone number ending in 407. I think you still have to press, is it *6 to unmute yourself on the phone?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, about time. Sorry, it's frustrating because when I log into my office, I have to remove in, and so it doesn't connect with my meeting. So I was HVIP voucher process.
You're still very faint, Charmin. It's very difficult to hear you. Do you want to repeat your question one more time?
The thing is that when I apply for drainage, I have permission to enter the. I have a contract with Nissan and another company through the port, and it works in. But basically, the port and the UIIA is saying I have to like get approval from them for that to be. Like, well, okay, so I have to spend all this money for you guys to say, okay, when I have a contract from the people that are shipping the cars in saying you can come in the port. So I got to comment on the drainage. Very confusing to me because it almost just seems like a money grab, you know, where I'm just trying to start this company. I have financing, I have the contracts, I have the vouchers, and it's like, oh, well, give us a bunch of money, and then we will tell you it's okay to enter, even though you can already enter. You know, it's very frustrating.
I can only hear your question so faintly, Charmin. So actually what I'm going to ask is if maybe you and I can meet separately and you can schedule a meeting with us using that ISEF email, ISEF at HVIP.org. And then we can meet and go through the drayage requirements because it's just too challenging to completely understand your question.
No, and I understand. It just was a huge frustration because I fought for months about it. I had letters. I had a lease agreement where I'm at the port approved by Nissan and their processing company saying, this is our provider here. We already ship out of here. And she's just going to take it over. And they're like, nope. It was crazy. And because I didn't have the UIAA or anything else, that it was turned down. So I would love to address it, but just because I feel like it's very unfair because I really am doing drayage and it's a technicality of, here, give us a bunch of money and then you can have drayage credit, you know? So anyway, that's my frustration.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's definitely chat more about what you need to provide to get the drayage plus up within HVIP and ISEF.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So there's only a few minutes left to this call, and we actually have some good questions and comments. I'm going to try to get through a couple of them, but then I'm also going to remind you folks that you can definitely reach out to us at ISEF at CaliforniaHVIP.org email and set up meetings to chat with us about all of these. We are definitely here to provide more fleet technical assistance, provider assistance with the provider application, and answer all your questions. First off, we have, is the commitment for 3 years the same as HVIP? Yes and no. The provider is committed to 3 years of operating this truck with a small fleet. However, it does not have to be the same small fleet for 3 years. So over the course of those 3 years, you can place the vehicle with different fleets, but you're still responsible for doing other things like giving us our annual survey results, reporting back on telematics, all of the normal things that within HVIP you have to perform for 3 years. Someone says, suppose your drive would be an incredible provider. They provide fleets to the entertainment industry. Yes, please put us in touch with them. I'd be happy to reach out and see how they can participate. So HVIP works as a down payment question. How will ISEF pay for insurance, EV chargers, and installation? Will there be an upfront payment and then applicants to finance the construction and request a reimbursement? So Yes, in a way, HVIP and ISEF do seem to operate like a down payment, right? Because it is paid directly to the dealer for that portion of the voucher. If there is additional funding that goes over the cost of the equipment that they would like to then apply to, say, chargers or installations or other parts of the overall provider package, dealer, customer, and provider can together let us know where that remaining voucher balance is to be paid to. Most likely it'll end up going to the provider. In this instance, if we are talking about installation costs, I believe those are not allowed. It has to be the actual charger hardware. Is that true, Andrea?
Yes, so for charging equipment and EVFC, it does not include installation or any make-ready costs. So for example, it would not include like the cost of trenching or conduits would not be an eligible cost under ISEF, but we can cover the hardware itself, any energy storage equipment or software to help manage load and demand, as well as on-site hydrogen fueling, physical equipment, or storage tanks.
However, though, if you guys need contacts and information on other incentive programs that help with more charger costs, including your local utility and other CEC opportunities, we are happy to help you find those. So again, feel free to reach out to us directly so that we can connect you with other resources to help with the cost of charger installations. Michael is saying that they cannot find this meeting on the CARB website. Can you provide a link to the presentation? Yes, so this is a webinar. It's a little bit different than the CARB sort of work groups and public hearings that you're used to seeing. The link to this will be available on the HVIP website. We'll also send it out via email. We have some questions here for qualifications. The qualifications for a small fleet, again, are 20 trucks or less and $15 million in revenue or less. Can this apply to 2023 vehicles? This can only be applied to vehicles which are in the HVIP catalog now. Please clarify, August 31st is the opening day for submitting vouchers. After that date, up to what date can vouchers be filed? It will be open until funds are exhausted. So it will open at the end of the month, and we will continue to accept both provider applications and voucher requests until funds are exhausted. At the end of 6 months, though, if the funds are not exhausted, we will remove provider caps. Can a provider or dealer purchase vehicles for rentals? Yes. However, when you put in that voucher request, you will need to identify at least one small fleet. Your very first customer does need to be identified at the time of a voucher request. And then after you rent to them, you can rent to others. But we do want you to at least have one. It looks like I think we've covered most of the questions and we are at time for the evening. Again, I'd like to really thank everyone who has been participating in this process in development of this program over this year. We, again, do view this as a pilot, so we are working out kinks together and we appreciate your patience with us. We hope that this first year gives us lots of valuable learnings so that we can tweak the program in the future. So please continue to attend these events, ask questions, submit your feedback, and follow up with us at any time, again, on our email address, which is isef@californiahvip.org. Andrea, did you have any closing words?
I think you pretty much covered it. I know we didn't have a chance to get through all of the questions that I'm sure many of you had today. So as Nikki said, really encourage you to reach out. You can see the email address on the screen. We're happy to try to help you via email or set up some additional time. to discuss and make sure that we get all of your questions answered. But we really hope that some of the small fleets listening in today are able to take advantage of this opportunity, and we'd love to help you get into a zero emission truck.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and have a good night.